Hoje em dia, a venda tradicional não tem mais vez. Se você pensa em qualquer lugar no mundo da startup, você está pensando em vendas. E se você pensa em vendas, você precisa não pensar o que é o tradicional. E é muito difícil isso. É muito difícil pensar o que é isso que eu estou dizendo. Então, para falar um pouco sobre isso, eu vou trazer um cara que é uma simpatia. Ele nasceu em Londres e ele hoje mora em São Francisco. E eu vou ver se eu consigo sair tocando depois de anunciar. É todo um trabalho aqui, ó, porque tem um microfone aqui, ó. Tem outro aqui. Então esse aqui é para voz. Eu quero chamar aqui ao palco Tim Clarke, da Salesforce. Tim.
Are you on the video? The video.
Revolutions came in waves. Water and steam mechanized production. Electricity created mass production. And electronics and IT automated everything. It brought us the mainframe, the client server, the cloud. And now the next wave is building. A blurring of the physical and digital world. A fourth industrial revolution is here. But the most profound change is not happening in technology itself. It's happening to the customer. The great equalizers, technology, mobility, and the internet have made customers exponentially smarter, faster, and put them in control like no other time in history. Welcome to the age of the customer.
Good afternoon, everyone. We were just having a conversation backstage on who's taller, and unfortunately I was just a few inches too small. So there are three things I want to talk about on this slide. Firstly, I'm just going to touch on the title. I was looking at the agenda board outside, and I felt this is actually a really depressing title, so forgive me for that. The Death of the Traditional Salesman. But actually, I think for the audience that are here and startups, it's a really exciting time because there are so many individuals, perhaps in these large organizations or mid-sized companies that are selling the traditional way, and there's an opportunity to really disrupt. And we're going to be going through that today to really look at how you can differentiate on some of these things. The second thing I want to call out is my title. I'm in marketing, and the amount of conferences and events that I've been to where I've sat there listening to a marketing person, and I was in sales before, and they've been telling me how to do my job, and I'm not down with that. So I want to tell you my background before I moved into marketing is I've carried the bag. I've been in sales for 8 years before, both at Salesforce and other companies. And I'll be sharing some of my own insights, as well as some brand new research that Salesforce has recently come out with, focused very much on sales. Now, if you're not familiar with Salesforce, I'm assuming many of you are, we have well over 150,000 organizations that are using our application to sell. Now, today I'm not going to talk about Salesforce, I'm not going to talk about our products, but with that many customers that are using our technology to sell, you would assume we know a little bit about the industry. And so actually next Monday we have a brand new research report that is coming out called the Salesforce State of Sales Research, which shares these insights from 3,500 sales reps, sales managers, and what are they doing? What are some of the key trends that they're focused on? And the third and final thing, before I get off the title slide, whoever knew that someone could talk to a title slide for so much, is my Twitter handle. So I would love, after this presentation, to go onto my Twitter feed and see some questions from you. So my Twitter handle, @TimXClarke. And if you have any thoughts, if you like me, if you don't like me, please hopefully be nice. But I would love any feedback, and hopefully then we can continue that engagement. Now, this is my first time in Brazil. As you can tell from the accent, I'm British, but I live in San Francisco. And don't worry, I'm not going to talk about 2014. I'm going to focus on 2016 and the Olympics. But clearly that's something that our two countries having in common, the UK and Brazil, with the Olympics. 2012, we hosted it in London, and then 2016, Brazil, it was a truly amazing job. And I'm not just saying that just to get some nice feedback from you. But football has always been one of my favorite sports. I'm an Arsenal fan. I had to give up my season ticket when I moved over to the US. It's also extremely nice to be in a country where I can say football rather than soccer, because clearly football is the right term. But really, I'm going to start this presentation focusing on sports, because when I started my career in sales, so at the age of 21, I was in telecoms, and I was a lot younger now and looked a lot better. And I'm going, hey, how do I start? Where do I start? How do I start to close more deals? How do I start to get commission? And my manager said, Tim, there is one thing that you need to learn in order to be successful at sales. And if the clicker, there we go, golf. He said to me, hey, you need to get on the golf course because that is where selling is done. It's all about the relationships. He also said, rule number 2, you need to also make sure that your customer always wins. But clearly now, selling has evolved a lot from this. And I appreciate that obviously we have the different nuances. So clearly if it's not golf, it could be perhaps taking them for lunch or perhaps for coffee. And there's so much focus on the relationships. But we need to do more than that now. And some of the best salespeople are going above and beyond the relationships. And the reason for this is because some of the evolution within technology. And we can see that there is so much data available now from all these different devices. Clearly, everyone holds a mobile phone. We've got tablets. We've got connected devices, connected cars, connected toothbrushes. And some of the really exciting startups that I've seen are really focused on what you do with this data and artificial intelligence and providing some of these key recommendations. And so now, as sellers, we're in this difficult situation because it isn't just about the relationships. The buyers are now in this smarter world. And so as a seller, how do we take the information that's available to us and really engage with them? Now, we've got some good news. We've got some prospects that actually are going out there, they're self-educating and qualifying. Many of you may be familiar with this stat. 57% of the buying process has been completed before they even engage a salesperson. I'm sure many of us can probably relate to this. We don't like talking to salespeople. If you're doing your own research, you want to find all the information out there online and try and self-educate. But it isn't all good news. We also have something of bad news. The result of this is actually that deal cycles are getting longer and longer. And we've seen a massive increase in this over the last 5 years, the average deal cycle. CB also have some great stats which talk about the amount of stakeholders that are involved in a purchasing decision. So last year they said 5.4 buyers are involved in that purchasing decision. And now this year, I was actually at their conference a few weeks ago in Vegas, and they've said 6.8 stakeholders are involved in a purchase decision. Now, I'm not quite sure what the 0.8 looks like, but in reality, what we're talking about here is as a salesperson, when you're looking at your buyer, you can't just sell to one person anymore. You need to engage with the person that is looking after the IT, that is looking after the sales, the service, the finances. And so as salespeople, we need to evolve the way that we sell and understand all these different buyer types. So we can see that the relationships are transformed, but we've also seen so much innovation in CRM as well. And this is transforming many of the different interactions that we have. And this could be at any points in the deal lifecycle, whether it's pre-sales or post-sales. You're looking at some of the key journeys, the marketing journeys as well. And so what happens when you really combine these two trends? You have this dilemma. We have the golfers, the traditional sales rep in the middle. We've got the evolution of technology on the right-hand side. And then we can see that actually everything now is about the customer. And so what do we do? The next stat I want to talk about is 1 million. In the US, Forrester says that the number of US B2B salespeople who will lose their jobs by 2020, and that's a scary stat. We can see there that if you're in sales right now, we think, well, actually, is my job going to go? Now, don't worry, there are some other stats as well from the US Bureau who talked about actually there's going to be some growth in sales as well. But it still makes you think a little bit of saying, actually, if the buyer's evolved, if CRM and technology has evolved, then what am I going to do as a seller? And the good news is it's not just about one key role. There's actually going to be an adaptation in where they go. So order takers, clearly we can automate this. We don't need salespeople to do this. Let's look at explainers. Well, they now have people like me who in product marketing, they're going to be able to market and tell you what my product is. And then when we look at navigators, where we have things like YouTube and different online tools that are actually going to give you the how-tos. And so it's the role on the right-hand side, which is the most exciting role. It's the consultative role. And this is the area where clearly we want everyone to focus, because this is where the growth is going to come from. So some of the research that we found from our Connected Customer Report is up on the screen here, and feel free to take pictures as we go through and tweet them out, and we can make the slides available as well. But we found that actually the buyers don't want to just work with someone that's going to do that quick sell. And depending on how your organization is structured, I think actually many companies have really evolved from this point, and I'll touch on this a little bit later on, that it's not just about the deal life cycle, it's about the customer life cycle. But they want to work with someone who actually values that business, the trusted advisor. And then some of the other key stats, you've got 76% of consumers and 83% of business buyers are actually saying it's critical. It's truly critical when they're making a decision between different competitors that they're going to work with someone that truly understands their needs and are not focused just on now, on the quick sell, but are looking at it on a longer term. So this sets the scene a little bit. I don't think there's anything mind-blowing out there. I think hopefully this gives you a bit of insight as to some of the research. And so now we're going to talk about what do we do about this. So moving away from the title of the death of a traditional salesperson, and really look about how you thrive in this new era of selling. So let's start off with the first one, thinking like a marketer. And as I said, being in both sales and marketing roles, this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. Now, one of the key things that everyone talks about in marketing is a funnel. How many people, just show of hands on the left-hand side, have seen a sort of funnel process before, this marketing funnel? Just put your hand up if you're familiar with it. Okay, fair few of you. I think this was written or created by someone in a consulting company who had never worked on a lead in their life. Because there is no way in hell that this is how marketing and sales work together. It is never as clean as this, where marketing creates the awareness, gets the interest, gets it to a qualified point, and then it goes, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Salesperson, here's the lead, can you go and close it for me? We know that actually there's this back and forth between sales and marketing, and we need them to work together. And so actually, I think this funnel process is more like on the right-hand side. You're going to have someone coming in, they're perhaps coming in via your website, they're going to engage with you, perhaps they're really ready to buy right now, and that's a great opportunity for the salesperson to engage. And focused on that point, let's just talk about actually these leads being handed off. One of the stats that we found from our research was that of all the leads that marketing are passing over to sales, qualified leads, only 50% are actually ready to buy. Now, I'm not sure your opinion. If I'm a salesperson and I'm given a lead from marketing and they say it's qualified, but actually they're not ready to buy, to me that's not qualified. So we have this fundamental issue of what's important to marketing and what's important to sales, and how are they working together. And we've seen that actually the lines are blurring and there's so much more cross-collaboration. And so the blue dots here, you'll probably be familiar with. If you use any marketing automation technology that's out there, there are so many things that can actually help you with that prospect that's coming in, to keep that engagement up, to help automate and set some of that stuff up. And from our research, we're seeing a really high percentage of companies that are either already using it or will be using it in the next 3 years. But as I said, this isn't just about marketing. For all the salespeople in the room that are here right now, you need to also get involved in this. You need to think like a marketer. And that's why I've added these 2 orange areas as well, which is also around the nurturing and alert. Because our research shows that actually if we do a really good job of nurturing these leads that are coming in, the majority of them are going to end up making a larger purchase. So what does that mean in reality? Let's go back to that previous stat. We've got a lead that has come in, they're qualified, they're the right fit, they're really interested in making that decision, but they're not ready to buy right now because they don't have that budget. So how can I, as a salesperson, not necessarily be dependent on marketing, and keep that engagement up with them, keep them warm, perhaps sending different information, and be that trusted advisor that we've already talked about, and help that buyer to show actually you care about them, you're not looking just at that quick sale. And this is really where we're seeing the majority of the most successful salespeople right now. And the stats also support this. So before I moved into the marketing role, when I was interviewing, I really spent a lot of time shadowing some of the marketing people, understanding what were some of the key metrics. And also now within Salesforce, some of the most successful marketers that I see are doing the same with the salespeople. And so within your organizations, I would strongly recommend to understand the goals and metrics. And this may seem obvious, but a lot of the time it can become a little bit siloed, and you're trying to do your own thing. You might be trying to optimize SEO for a certain percentage, or bringing in X amount of lead form completes. But if none of that is relevant to sales, then it's pointless. There's just no point in doing it. And what we have seen is that when sales and marketing teams get this right, and again, this is from our state of sales research, we can see that actually they're seeing an increase in productivity and an increase in collaboration. So the call to action from this section 1 is to truly help your sales teams to think like a marketer. Now, it's not displacing those roles of marketing, and it's not asking salespeople to do yet another thing, but it's thinking about how they can increase that engagement. If you're in marketing, how you can give some of the tools and relevance and information to those salespeople. And if you're in sales, how you can nurture and continue that engagement with them. So let's move on to section 2, which is focused on minor in data science. Now again, show of hands, who in the room is a data scientist? I see 1 hand, 2. Okay, very low percentage. That's a challenge, right? I talked right at the beginning that we have so much information and data available, but if we don't have the people supporting us to really help out with that, then we have this big issue. And so one of the things we have to think about here is how can we leverage this data, and how can we help salespeople to effectively act like data scientists? And so you can see some stats here about all these different data sources that you're having to look at as a sales rep before you engage with that prospect. Now, perhaps I'm looking at a particular opportunity, and I'm selling into Joe Blog. So I go onto LinkedIn and I look at that particular contact, and then maybe I see an advertisement on the right-hand side, and I get easily distracted. So then I click into that, and then all of a sudden I'm on YouTube, and I'm watching cat videos, and I get extremely distracted. So there is so much data. What can we do to make it easy for the salespeople to leverage this and to truly have a relevant conversation? And our research is showing that most sales organizations are really struggling with this, and they're missing out on the opportunities because they're not able to keep up with this information. Now, it's clear that obviously if you can do something with this data, then that's going to improve the sales efficiency. And so when I talk about data, it's not just things in advance. So it's not just finding lists of people that you're selling into within a particular industry, but it's also starting to look at different algorithms. Why were you successful on one deal, but not this one that looks extremely similar on the face of it? Perhaps looking at key trends, time of year, different analytics. And using that, and most importantly, using the technology that supports it, it can then start to provide predictive intelligence. And I know this is an area that Salesforce is working on, and many other great startups as well, because then for the salespeople, this is how they become their own data scientists, because the technology is going to start recommending these next best actions, and then we can start to automate it. So from our research, we found that actually many of sales organizations are really starting to make these investments in predictive intelligence. And we can see on the left-hand side here, 74% are starting to use this in order to make recommendations on next best actions. I know I've seen this in a couple of pieces of technology. I'll keep it vendor agnostic. Where as a sales rep, I'm looking on my phone, perhaps I receive an email, and then on the right-hand side, it gives me a pop-up and it says, hey, this person, you created an opportunity with 6 months ago. It went a little bit cold, but lead scoring-wise, they tick all these different boxes. They're the right buyer for you, but they didn't have the budget right then. And then it provides me that recommendation. It says, hey, why don't you send this piece of content to them and start to warm up that lead again? And it's really the majority of sales teams that are starting to use this technology to stand out and really differentiate themselves. And it doesn't just stop there around predictive. It's also moving into deep learning as well to start to look at the patterns and the analytics here as well so that marketing and sales teams can start to anticipate these next needs. So really some of the recommendations I would say here that we've seen from our research is, number one, just as salespeople, without technology, never stop questioning. There's clearly so much work that you can do to help coach your sales teams on the questioning skills. So just some basics, like moving away from the closed questioning to the open questions, having a standardized sales methodology to ensure that every time you're doing a deal review, you don't look at why you're going to win the deal, you're going to look at why you won't win the deal. And that was one of the most important lessons that I learned in sales because I was a salesperson. I wanted to convince myself that I was going to get the deal. And there's nothing worse when you get to the end of the month and then you seem surprised when you don't get the deal. The middle one is extremely important. The amount of sales reps that I have seen, including at Salesforce and other companies, who can't even use an Excel spreadsheet to start combining different formulas and adding up different cells. We can't, as sales reps, we can't be dependent on always having an analyst. It would be lovely to have someone that can really take all this different data and put it into spreadsheets or into really heavy computing systems and then provide the output to the sales rep or the sales manager. But if we think about it within the startup world, that's a heavy investment, whether it's in the technology or whether it's in the role, and it's just not feasible. And so now there are so many different analytics tools that are available out there to make it simple for the end users to manipulate and interpret the data however they want. And our research has showed that actually this is a really big focus area for sales teams right now. So of the 3,500 sales executives that we interviewed, there's a really high majority of them that are looking at making these investments in the analytics, or they plan to over the next 3 years. And of the ones that are, we're also seeing significant improvements in different areas as well. So when we talk about the insights you should be looking for out of those analytics tools, these are some of the questions that perhaps you could consider as the basic table stakes. So perhaps you're in a SaaS business and you're looking at some of the key things in the Salesforce world. Some of the key stats that we really look at are things like customer health. Clearly, we're in a renewals organization. We have to keep our customers happy. We want to keep our customers happy. We want them adopting the technology. We want them being successful. And so we don't want to operate in the method of sell and walk away. We spend a lot of time really working with them to ensure they're using it, and we can report on that. That's the analytics that comes back. And then that means that when we come up to the renewal stage, we can provide recommendations, and we have all the data available to us of what works and what doesn't work. It's exactly the same in pipeline. If you're using Salesforce, there are some best practices of different dashboards or whichever CRM you use, but clearly you have to get the right insights for you around that. But let's move on to the new table stakes that you should really be focused on. And this is where we're moving a little bit more into the predictive world. When you're reviewing your opportunities, for any sales managers that are in the room, when you're reviewing the opportunities, it's reviewing what are the recommended next steps. What are the key priorities? Why wouldn't you win the deal? Back to my earlier point. One of the other areas I like to look at is areas of friction in the sales cycle. So there's some great technology out there that really helps you do the opportunity planning, account planning, reviewing all your key stakeholders, the different relationships that you have with them. And then that's going to help you identify who are the people that are on your side, who are the friends, who are the supporters, who's the influencers, who's the economic buyer, the decision maker. That goes back to my earlier point of there being 6.8 stakeholders involved in that purchasing decision. So really the key takeaway here is that in order to really be successful, it's leveraging the data that is available to you, both through your individuals, so as salespeople working on their own individual skills, and then two, starting to look at the really cool technology that's out there, both from companies like Salesforce, but also many great startups as well, that are helping provide some of this predictive intelligence. So moving into the third and final section in terms of how you can really thrive in this new world of selling is about owning the customer experience. Now, I talked a little bit about Salesforce's model, and if any of you have read the book Behind the Cloud from our CEO, Mark Benioff, when he created the company in 1999, he created this role, the Customer Success Manager, Customer Success Director. And their role, and it was kind of interesting for me reading this before I joined, their role was extremely interesting because they were not focused on selling. The software worked, so they didn't have to deal with service issues, but they were truly focused on getting the customers to adopt. And it all sounds well and nice, but clearly there is a reason for why companies like Salesforce and SaaS do this, because actually we're finding that the incremental revenue is going to come from our existing customers. We want to work with them, we want to align to their business and to their key objectives, and then that helps us to truly understand areas that we can support them with some of their business pains. And this is actually a Gartner stat. I mean, it may seem fairly obvious with Pareto's law, but it's ensuring that as a sales rep, you don't just do this. You don't just focus on the deal lifecycle. This is the old way of selling. This is the traditional salesperson that will die. The companies that are being most successful now have moved away from a deal lifecycle, and they're moving to this new model, the customer lifecycle. And it goes back to that very first point about being that trusted advisor. Now, clearly, a salesperson has a number to hit, and you know, sometimes we're guilty at an executive level of perhaps giving some of the wrong metrics to drive certain behaviors, because if all of the key metrics that sales are focused on is just commission and closing deals, then perhaps they will just focus on that sale. But if they're not focused on these other areas around developing and retaining, and then ultimately getting a renewal and engaging in other areas, then we're not going to get that incremental business. And this is actually supported by our research as well. So this, again, is our state of sales research. We found that some of the key objectives that are right at the top are really shifting away from some of those traditional metrics. They're moving much more towards the customer lifecycle. And we can see right here at the top that number one is the importance of growing number of leads, new customers, and the ones in green are clearly the top ones. And it's not just about increasing average order size now. The organizations that are being successful have recognized that actually we can't just focus on year one. We have to really spend that time developing these relationships and nurturing. Now, I get it. If you're a big enterprise company, it's very easy for you to do this. And in the startup world, clearly you've got to get that growth coming in, and it's that right balance. And so it's identifying those key companies that you can get that growth from, but also keep those relationships going on with as well. And the reason those relationships is so important, our research shows that actually customer experience and success is now higher than some of the traditional sales metrics. And we can see that right here as well. And this is what organizations are focused on, is what is that experience. And we all know that if there isn't a good customer experience, then it's going to yield certain consequences. If we don't have a good experience with a vendor, and we can all think of certain examples here, then there's going to be different impacts of that, whether it's deals lost, whether perhaps we lose some existing customers when it comes down to renewal points, our deals get smaller and smaller, or the sales cycles get longer and longer. And so really we've gone full circle here in terms of point 3. It goes back to the stats that I showed you right at the beginning, which is that the best salespeople right now are truly focused on becoming trusted advisors. Now, I've been on so many different social networks, and this term trusted advisor or thought leader is used quite a lot. My role at Salesforce is actually running our sales thought leadership program. And I think it's extremely important that you don't just throw it onto your LinkedIn profile and say, Tim Clarke, thought leader, because actually you need to prove yourself. And what I mean by that is if you're sharing content on LinkedIn, and this goes back to that cycle at the beginning when prospects are obviously connecting with you and engaging with you, when you're sharing content, make sure you offer your own perspective, because otherwise you're just an aggregator, you're just a sharer. And one of the quotes I love from Gary Vaynerchuk is that content is king, but context is God. And this is an extremely important thing to think about. And so I would identify what are the key blogs that are relevant in your industry. So for me at Salesforce, if I'm selling into VPs of sales, then I will look at sales-specific blogs, sales-specific content that isn't necessarily about product. We know that that doesn't work. Perhaps on the Twitter feed and you see, hey, buy my product, that's just not going to be successful. But if I'm sharing an article that says, hey, this company increased sales by 54% and the VP of sales changed their team strategy because they did A, B, and C, and then I emailed that through to a prospect and I spent the time understanding actually, hey, I know this is your pain point and I read that actually your sales results were down this year, but you're focusing in increasing your focus over here. Actually, I think this article is going to be very relevant to you. That's more likely to get me a conversation with that buyer. And we all know how hard it is. You know, the amount of prospecting emails that I get, which are automated and using the technology and are really bad templates. You know, ones that I particularly hate going, hey, Tim, I know you focus on marketing people. I don't. I'm really keen to set up a meeting. I know you're based in London. I'm not. I know you love rugby. I don't. There's no excuse now as a seller when you're reaching out to that buyer. You need to truly do your research. All the data is available out there. And so then leveraging that with content so you can be that trusted advisor. So my key takeaway here is making sure that actually you've got your own perspective, that you've got a point of view. These are some of the books that I really focused on when and read when I was starting out my sales career. If you're not familiar with CB, The Challenger Sale, this is a book that came out several years ago, and it really talked about the different sellers. And if you're managing a sales team, what are the different types of personalities and skills that you need? They recently came out with another book called The Challenger Customer, which shares their latest research there on how sales and the buyers need to work together. And so really, what I started to focus on as I came towards the end of my sales days is I started to think about what do my customers say about me? And this is a great exercise that you can actually take back to your businesses and you can use as well. Internally at Salesforce, we use Chatter, our collaboration tool, and we get our reps when they join to share what are the top 3 things that they want their customers to think about. And then other people engage and they share their thoughts. And this is something I would put to you to really think about within your organizations. How do you want to be perceived? How do you want your salespeople to be perceived? So for me, this is my list that I really started to focus on. So number 1, that he knows my business, that I spent the time to truly understand what are they focused on? What are the key priorities? Where are the areas that I can support them? Number 2, that I have their best interest at heart, that I'm not just trying to make that quick sale to them, that I'm truly looking at it from that customer lifecycle perspective. And then number 3, I may be a pain in the ass, but hopefully I'm still helpful and in a good way. So I've shared with you here as we've gone through today some of the insights from some of our recent research reports. I would get your phones out and take a photo of this slide and the next slide if you want to download some of the research. So the state of the connected customer is already out. And then on next Monday, which is the majority of research we've been sharing with you today, we have our state of sales research as well. And then the other thing I would also like to flag to you is we have this other site called quotable.com. And this isn't about Salesforce, this is not about product, but I want to go back to that final point about being that trusted advisor. And this site here, really, it has a ton of content which is all top of the funnel, and what I mean by that is it's thought leadership content, it's sharing insights, it's sharing best practices. And we have many of the Salesforce executives, people that have built their sales careers across the software industry that are sharing their insights. We've got organizations like McKinsey and CB, big research companies who are sharing their insights. And if you're interested in writing for this site as well, we would love you to contribute. If you've got something to say about sales or about marketing, there's a whole section on there on the ways that you can contribute. So to wrap up, you don't need to be negative, you don't need to be concerned. The traditional salesperson is dying. And so you could look at that in one or two ways. If that person is within your organization, how can you help that individual? How can you help develop their skills in the three areas that we've talked about? Or perhaps they're not in your organization and they're in these other organizations, the larger ones that you're trying to disrupt with some of your great technology in the industries that you're starting your business in. Then these three different areas, thinking like a marketer, acting like a data scientist, and then thinking about the overall customer lifecycle, are going to be the areas that will help you successful and to help you thrive in the new era of selling. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you found this really insightful. Thank you.